Today I want to show you how to make a sweet potato pie. Vardaman, Mississippi is the sweet potato capital of the world and hosts an annual sweet potato festival featuring a pie eating contest and a sweet potato king and queen competition. That's how important the sweet potato is to the South. Now, a nice alternative to pumpkin, especially if you don't like pumpkin, you're gonna love sweet potato pie. Choose 4 sweet potatoes of equal size. I just make a few fork holes in it and get this right into a 400-degree oven and roast them until they are soft. It takes at least an hour. And while the sweet potatoes are roasting, it's a good idea to get your crust ready. This recipe calls for a blind baked crust. And it's a pâte brisée. It's been chilled. That makes it easier to roll. And we'll get it rolled out into a nice round without falling apart. If it's well-made pâte brisée, it does that. Work on a floured surface, and I like to keep churning the dough so that I'm getting a nice even thickness to my round. I like baking these pies in a glass pie plate. It bakes really well. This is a 9-inch pie plate, and once you get the pastry to an even thinness, just roll it up. This is the easiest way to transfer from your rolling surface to your dish. Unfurl it. I like to use a scissor just to cut off the excess. I leave about a 1/2 inch overhang. And here I'm folding under the edge so that I can nicely flute it. And if your dough becomes a little too soft, get it right back into the refrigerator. Just a little bit of chilling will make it much, much easier to handle. So you see that looks good. And everybody has a different way of making a fluted crust. But if you use your 2 forefingers and your thumb, you can shape your crust very nicely. And this crust calls for blind baking, which means we're going to pre-bake the crust so that when we get the sweet potato filling ready, we pour that filling into the crust and then bake it again. Use a fork to dock the bottom of your crust. This will help the crust cook evenly and prevent bubbles or eruptions in the baking of the crust. Chill it now. And here's that gorgeous, gorgeous crust, all chilled. Oh, and make sure your oven is preheated to 375 degrees. We want to line this with parchment paper. So I have a nice round of parchment paper. A little hard to put that big round in there, so I just crumple up my paper. And now it will fit much more easily into the bottom of the crust. It works really, really well. And then pour your mixture of weights. I just use an assortment of different dried beans that I use over and over again as weights. And they fill all the nooks and crannies and do a very fine job of weighting down the crust. Get this right into your 375 oven and bake until the pastry begins to color around the edges, about 30 minutes. Then you're going to remove the beans and parchment and continue to bake until the pastry is dried out and turns a light golden color. About 10 minutes more. And our sweet potatoes are miraculously ready, cooled, and we will start making the filling. So here's our beautiful pie crust. The underside is a lovely golden brown. The sweet potatoes have cooled also, and we need 2½ cups of sweet potatoes. And they peel very easily by hand. Just peel off the skin, which is loosened from the flesh by the baking. And we need 2½ cups of potato puree. And you can measure ahead of time. This looks like 1 cup. Just put this in your food processor. And this is exactly 2½ cups, so no problem. We'll just put this in and puree it nicely. So just process those potatoes until they're smooth. There, that's good. So that will go right into our bowl when we're ready. And into a large mixing bowl, 3 large eggs. Whisk those up. 1½ cups of 50/50. Your sweet potato mixture. Good deep color. That's what we want. You might ask, well, why not use canned sweet potato? This is so infinitely superior and so easy. There's no reason to use the canned variety. And sweet potatoes are readily available everywhere now. As soon as you get this pretty well mixed, add 4 tablespoons of melted, cooled butter and 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of allspice. So 2/4 teaspoons of allspice and 3/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Freshly grated nutmeg, about 1/8 teaspoon. Fragrant and delightful. And the zest of a lemon, about 1 teaspoon. Now your oven at this point should be preheated to 400 degrees. And don't forget 1/3 cup of sugar. And that's the filling. Very similar to pumpkin pie. There. Pour this right into your beautiful pie crust. It should be just about enough. Right into the oven. It'll come out in about 50 minutes. Wait till you see it baked. The pie is baked. Cool it completely before slicing. And just lift that out. Looks so good. Serve and delight. This delicious sweet potato pie is a Southern favorite that really can't be beat. Try it instead of pumpkin. Do you know how many gallons of maple sap it takes to make 1 quart of maple syrup? Believe it or not, 10 gallons. And that's probably why maple syrup is referred to as liquid gold all over New England. Let's begin first with the crust for this pie. Use a little bench flour, spread it all over your counter, and make sure the crust is well chilled. And I'm constantly lifting and flouring underneath. You can also flour the pin. If it gets too soft, put it right back on a cookie sheet in the freezer and just let it harden up a little bit before you proceed. Now, to get it into here, just roll it quickly on the pin, lightly and quickly. And I'm using a glass pie plate. These glass pie plates are really handy. You should get yourself quite a few of them because as you give pies away, they disappear. And I'm trimming the edges neatly, leaving an overhang of about 1/2 inch. And this is going to be pre-baked, blind baked, the old bakers said. So notice I'm just rolling this under so that it is right on top of the rim. And another reason for using glass is that when you bake it, you can look at the bottom and see how nicely brown it is. Okay, so now get that right back into the refrigerator. Now the next thing is to make many of these little maple leaves, and I need lots of these. So I'm going to roll out another disc, get it nicely thin. Okay, so now start cutting. If they're not too warm, take the back of a sharp knife. So go like this, and you just have to do 1 or 2 lines, just to make it look more like a leaf. When these are done, put them right back into the refrigerator. And now we want to apply the leaves to the edge of the pie shell. We have 1 egg. This is the glue. And you can use a small brush like that, and you just put an egg wash all the way around the edge and on the back of each leaf. This will really help them adhere well to the edge. Doesn't that look gorgeous already? Now, when you finish, put this right back into the refrigerator and chill again. A beautifully applied edge, and now carefully brush your egg wash over all those maple leaves. Why do this? Well, it gives a very beautiful, glistening brown edge to your maple pie. Now, make sure your oven is preheated to 375 degrees. One more step. Fold this parchment like this. And like this, point to edge. This will fit in, see? But better yet, go like this. Crunch it all up This makes it go in even faster. See how nice? This is an assortment of red kidney beans, black-eyed peas. You can have lentils. Rice works very well too, although it's not as heavy as a bean. And they fill every nook and cranny. Put this in the oven, 20 to 25 minutes, and bake until it is all an even golden brown. So here's the crust. You can look at the bottom, gorgeously brown. It is ready to be filled. And the filling has very few ingredients. 1 cup of real maple syrup. Bring this to a boil and reduce it till it gets a little bit thicker than it is. In the meantime, we need 4 egg yolks and 1 whole egg. Save your whites. So beat that up. Add 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of the best vanilla, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. Oh, this is the fragrance, the wonderful spice. Okay, so the eggs are ready and the syrup has reduced itself. Add your heavy cream, 2 cups. And if you were standing here, you would love the smell. It's so fantastic. Bring this back to a simmer. And now add this very slowly, whisking at the same time to your egg mixture. Warm those egg yolks. Then put this mixture through a sieve. Now make sure your oven is heated to 300 degrees so it bakes at a low temperature. Should be just the right amount to come up to the maple leaves but not cover the edge. Bake it until the custard is just set but still a little bit wobbly in the center. It's going to take about 45 to 60 minutes. So here is the finished pie. It is cool, and so now just take out the slice. Comes off very nicely. That's a very pretty slice of pie. Forgive me, but I can't wait. This is the perfect finish to any autumnal meal. Our test kitchen was really excited with the outcome of this recipe for gluten-free spiced pumpkin pie with a crisp rice crust. It all began with the creative use of a crunchy rice cereal combined with a mixture of butter, brown sugar, and almonds. And that crust is just pressed into a pie plate, and it looks just like a crumb crust. So it's very easy to make. 3 cups of gluten-free rice cereal, and it says it right on the box, gluten-free. 1/4 cup plus a tablespoon of light brown sugar. 1/2 cup of almonds. They can be raw almonds that are sliced or whole. Either will work. And 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And butter, 5 tablespoons of butter, which I'll add. I'm going to grind this up a little bit first. When you're grinding almonds or any kind of nuts, make sure that your blade of your food processor is sharp. And now add your butter, 5 tablespoons of melted butter. So that looks good. And now this can be just dumped right into, I like using glass because I can see if the bottom of the crust is well made. Well baked, I should say. And this is a 9-inch glass pie plate. And spread this into an even layer, a little thicker on the outside than in the center. And you can use the back of your hand, your fingers if you like. That's how we always used to do it until we found out that pressing with a little metal cup measure works very well and quickly. This can just press your crust into a nice even layer. Look how nice, this works so well. And preheat your oven to 375 degrees. Try to make the sides all equal thickness and just pop this into your oven and make the filling. Takes about 12 minutes. And now for the pumpkin filling, the spicy pumpkin filling, 1.5 cups of pumpkin puree. This can be homemade. Of course, it can also be canned. Pumpkin is one of the nicest foods that you can get out of a can. 3 eggs, and whisk the eggs into the pumpkin. It's a custardy filling, very similar to a traditional pumpkin pie. You can also use any number of squashes for this pie too. Instead of pumpkin, you could use the wonderful butternut squash, acorn squash, kabocha squash. They all make very nice pie fillings. And 3/4 of a cup of light brown sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, some cornstarch, about 1 tablespoon will do, just in case your squash is a little wet, a pinch of cloves, and some cinnamon, 1 teaspoon. Also, my favorite, nutmeg. Just about 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. So stir this up. Brown sugar gets lumpy and dry really fast, which is why we keep it in a sealed container. And it'll be very hard to break up if it gets too dry. So you can just add this right to your pumpkin. And now add 1 cup of milk, whole milk. Some people might use cream, but the milk works very nicely. Make sure that your oven is set to 325 degrees. But you can see it's nice and silky smooth. Get this right into your pie crust. This rice crust, which is gluten-free, can be used with a filling of cream, of chiffon or custard. Chocolate is very good. You can experiment, but it's a very nice crust to have on hand when you want to make a delicious pie. There, get that right into your oven. It's going to take about 50 to 55 minutes. So for the topping for this delicious pumpkin pie, we're not done. Yogurt, 3 cups of yogurt, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, and 3 tablespoons of honey. And this you just dollop right on top. Use a nice thick yogurt, like a Greek style. So just spoon this right on top. You want to just cover the whole pie with your yogurt. Looks so beautiful. And you can just put this back into the fridge to chill a little bit until you're ready to serve. And there you have a spicy, gluten-free pumpkin pie. You can experiment with all sorts of fillings for this unique crust, but this one just might turn out to be your favorite. Enjoy. You are going to have the best treat. This is a delicious recipe, and it is a chocolate caramel cream pie with a silken chocolate pudding filling and caramel whipped cream. It's a truly decadent dessert. You need a pâte brisée crust, and I'm just rolling out 1/2 of our perfect pie crust pâte brisée recipe. You can see all the bits of butter in here. It makes a very delicious tender crust. Okay, so that looks good. So now to get this into the dish, if you're worried about it tearing or ripping, you could try to lift it up and flop it in, but this is a pretty easy way to lift up a big piece of pastry. Just roll it on your rolling pin like this and place your crust right over the dish. You need to tuck under the excess crust, completely covering the glass rim of the dish. There's not that much overhang, so I don't even have to trim on this crust. Just roll it under. And we're going to make an edge that we call bear's teeth. Make an even number of cuts, about 1/2 inch apart, all the way around the crust. Just like that. And then what you do is fold in one and leave one down. Fold in one and leave one down. That gives the most charming crust. Go all the way around. If it gets too soft, put it in the refrigerator to chill and continue. I have one that's already done, so I'll just put this into chill. So here's one that's already finished, all the way around, very neat looking, and docked with a fork. Docking prevents the bottom crust from bubbling up or erupting when it's baking. This keeps the crust nice and flat in the bottom of the dish. Now this has to be blind baked, which means baked before it is filled. And to blind bake, take a piece of parchment paper. It can be white like this or unbleached, and I just wrinkle this all up. Makes it easier to fill with the weights. It makes the paper less stiff. And now fit this into your crust and fill with pie weights. You can buy aluminum weights. You can use beans, you can use rice. I find these beans, which are probably 20 years old, very effective weights. Now put this right into a preheated 375-degree oven for about 20 minutes. Then remove the beans and bake until it's a nice light golden brown. So now we're going to show you how to make the filling for the chocolate caramel cream pie. And the chocolate custard that goes in the crust first is made out of 4 ounces of bittersweet chocolate, melted in 2.5 cups of whole milk. And let that melt over a low flame. You can whisk it. And the dry ingredients that thicken the custard, 1/4 cup of cornstarch, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. Whisk this all together. Now, this is a pudding. A pudding generally has a thickener in it, like cornstarch. And a custard is thickened with eggs. Good. We don't want any lumps. Now, this goes right into the milk and the chocolate. You just put the whole thing in. This will cook until it is nice and thick. We need 4 egg yolks. Now these are going to add more flavor and an additional thickness to our pudding. Now to temper, add a little bit of this very hot chocolate pudding into the egg yolks. You're bringing the temperature of the egg yolks up to the same temperature as the chocolate. And then you can put this back into the pot. And so now just add your egg yolk mixture to the chocolate. Stir this, cook for 1 to 2 minutes. Smells so good. It is a delicious chocolate pudding. And here is our bear's tooth edged pie crust. It is a beautiful color on the back as well as on the front. It's tender, but it still holds its shape if you lift it very delicately. Now pour your chocolate pudding right into the crust. This should fill the 9-inch crust exactly. And in order that a crust doesn't form on the pudding, just place plastic wrap right on the surface. Now this can be put into the refrigerator to chill. Now you can make the caramel for the whipped cream topping. 1/2 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of water. And I don't stir this, I just swirl. This is going to be the caramel. So turn this on a pretty high flame. I sometimes just cover it and let the steam rise up the sides of the pan onto the cover, and it drops back down, preventing any crystallization. Another way to stop the crystallization that might occur is to take a brush with water and just run it around the rim right above the sugar water. So now reduce the heat and add your cream. Keep cooking. If you just left it with no cream, it would turn into a hard crack candy. With the cream, it becomes like a sauce. So beautiful. So that's a nice color. And now because it's so liquidy, just immerse the whole bottom of the pot. Now listen to this. It makes a sizzling noise, and this will help thicken the caramel. So here is our caramel sauce. Very, very nice. Now with this, we are going to flavor whipped cream. The whipped cream is going to top the chocolate pudding. And it's 1.5 cups of heavy cream whipped to soft peaks. Make sure the caramel is cold before you do this. So delicious. And just whip this some more until it gets nice and thick. You could use an electric hand beater if you don't want to test your muscular strength with a whisk. But this is good exercise. So look, everyone, it does get nice and thick. So here's our pie shell. And now dollops of the caramel cream on top of the chocolate. We want this nice and high and beautifully sculpted to your taste. Now, to finish this off, we made the same amount of 1/2 cup of sugar with 2 tablespoons of water and poured the caramel on a non-stick pad. This makes a really pretty glassy-like caramel. And you can just break this up with a serrated knife into almost like broken stained glass. Very brittle. Break it into really kind of small pieces. Amber. So now sprinkle this amber all over the top. And this is certainly gilding the lily. And really pretty. Mile High Apple Pie is all about the apples and the crust. Flaky and light, encasing a big pile of 3 different kinds of apples. In order to learn how to make the best pâte brisée, you should really just follow the golden rules. Make it cold, bake it hot, and if possible, use a food processor. And so it's 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, and you can just pulse that so the salt is evenly distributed. Even the salt can be cold. And 2 sticks of butter, and it should be cold and hard for this process of cutting the butter into the flour. And we're going to measure 1/2 cup of iced water. So you want to pour your water while you pulse on the outside of your tube. So it looks like it's pretty much done. Okay, so just wrap this in a flat round in a piece of plastic wrap, and that is going to roll into 1 good pie crust. You need 2 of these. And now we're going to use our first batch of pâte brisée for Mile High Apple Pie. Today we're using different kinds of apples from Breezy Hill Orchards up in Staatsburg, New York. Jana Gold, these big red-tinged apples, very tart, very nice. Mutsu, these are large with a lot of deep flavor. And we're also adding to the mix today Granny Smiths. We're using 5.5 pounds of apples in this one pie. And we're going to also add to the apples, to keep them from turning brown, the juice of 2 lemons. I'm cutting off the tips of the lemons because they squeeze better in this handy tool that we use. Okay, so there. Now the apples also get 1 cup of sugar. And we're going to just sprinkle that over. And 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. And a little pinch of salt. And 1/3 cup of flour. Just all-purpose flour. Now, if you use a metal spoon, you might break up your apple, so I suggest using either your hands to toss the fruit or a big rubber scraper like this. And so you're distributing all those lovely ingredients throughout the apples. Perfect. Ready for the filling. So now we have a nice crust rolled out to a little less than 1/8 of an inch thick. And then to get it into the bottom crust, just roll it up like this on your pin. And having a good rolling pin is important too, a big enough pin. So look how nice this looks. Put in the apples. You know, these are going to cook down a little bit. They're going to get tender, and they will make a most exquisite pie. There. Oh, and before I forget, dot your pie filling with a little bit of unsalted butter. Okay, so here we have our crust for the top. And I think so that we have no chance of breakage, I'm going to just roll this on my rolling pin. This is a very good method for lifting up a delicate crust. Once you form your crust, crimp your edges, we're going to re-chill the pie in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes. You need a pair of scissors. And I'm just going to cut off the excess. Leave 1/2 inch or so hanging over the edge of the dish. Now watch. You're going to turn this over. Work fast because the pastry does soften up. That's nice. And now if you want to cut a few vent holes in the top, good idea. There, just little slits like this. Oh, and now crimp the edges. There's various ways to crimp. You can use these two fingers and your thumb of your other hand. My mom used a fork. Whatever's your favorite way of making a pretty decorative edge. Okay, so now, from your leftover pastry, I'll make a couple decorations for the top and vein the leaves with the back of your little paring knife. Chill these 20 minutes. We're ready to glaze the top of the pie. So the pie is nicely chilled. Let's apply the branches and leaves using water as your glue. Water works remarkably well in making sure that the pastry adheres to the other pastry. And just put on your leaves. That looks very nice. We're ready to glaze the top of the pie. We are going to use 1 egg yolk and 2 tablespoons of water. And use a soft bristle brush to not tear your pastry or to make marks on your beautiful pie. Work quickly because you want to get this cold pie into a hot oven, preheated to 450 degrees for 15 minutes. You'll then lower that temperature and bake the pie until it's done. That may take an hour, it may take an hour and 15 more minutes, but it's essential that the juices in the middle of the pie are bubbling. So see now, I'm just sprinkling, a light sprinkling of this sparkly sugar. So get it in the oven and set your timer. Now this apple pie took 1 hour and 35 minutes to bake. The way I can tell the apples are done is with a bamboo skewer, and you can just go into one of the vent holes and push down through the pie. I meet no resistance, meaning the apples are cooked. And the crust itself is glistening with that sanding sugar. The pie looks done. Now I'm going to show you how to make cherry tart. The first thing that we're going to do is make the pastry cream. And probably you've all been introduced to the recipe, the traditional way of making pastry cream, which is to temper the eggs and the milk, and then add your other ingredients, and then add your butter last as an enrichment. This is a much simpler method. And so the first thing we do is put everything in a pot. Use a heavy bottom saucepan. Non-reactive metal is best. 1/2 cup of sugar, granulated sugar, 1/4 cup of cornstarch. This is our thickener. A pinch of salt. I like salt, so and now 2 cups of whole milk and 4 large egg yolks.
So what's the advantage of adding your yolks here, just so that you can whisk them into the milk?
We're just measuring the milk anyway, so we might as well just put it in here. I'm trying to use as few utensils as possible. And also add your butter, 2 tablespoons of butter. And that will melt, so bring this to a boil. And you don't have to worry, the eggs will not curdle. Okay, this looks very lovely. And how long did that take?
2 minutes.
Not long.
Definitely a big time saver.
So now we're going to put this through a sieve. Now, pastry cream can be left just like this, but then you can also flavor it with liqueurs. You can also add coffee. You can also add melted chocolate to this. It's quite a versatile cream. So isn't that beautiful? And 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Best quality, of course. Stir that in. And one of my favorite flavorings for cherry tart, and that's what we're making today, Bing cherry tart, is cherry liqueur, so 4 teaspoons.
And no liquid is gonna thin out the pastry cream?
Well, if you added a
Too
cup.
much? Yeah.
But then you wouldn't be able to even know that it's thin because you'd be so drunk. So that is it. So put a plastic wrap over and put that right in the refrigerator. Pâte brisée, which is my basic pie crust, has no eggs and very little sugar. And the pâte sucrée has 2 egg yolks, and the pâte sucrée extra has an extra egg yolk. So that's what we're making. 2½ cups of all-purpose flour, unbleached, a pinch of salt, 1/3 of a cup of sugar. And I'm going to just pulse this a little bit. It's the same thing as sifting it. Using a food processor it makes this really, really easy. We have timed making it by hand and making it in a food processor, and I think it takes 16 or 18 seconds in a food processor, and it takes a lot longer by hand. Yeah. Maybe the butter is icy cold, 2 sticks cut up into beautiful cubes. Really helps very much in the cutting in process. I still want to have little tiny bits of butter visible. And then we have 3 large egg yolks and 1/4 of a cup of ice water. Beat this up a little bit.
Do you use sucré instead of brisée just for flavor? Is the texture preferred?
It's a little sturdier and tasty because it's sweet and pretty. It keeps its shape very nicely. And you can just pour this.
Now, can this be done ahead of time?
Oh yeah, you can keep it refrigerated overnight. Don't keep it too much longer. You know how pastry starts to get gray?
Yeah.
So, but look at the great color. And put this on a little bit of bench flour. You have to have enough moisture. You have to make sure it's not too dry. If it's too dry, you're going to have a really hard time rolling it out. Just divide this in half because this will make 2 9-inch tarts. And wrap this in plastic wrap, a nice flat round. So these will go into the fridge. And we have one all ready to roll. We have a 9-inch tart shell. We want it to be larger than the pan. Now, how do you get the dough from here to there?
Roll it onto your rolling pin.
Good. And watch what you're doing. See, it went in very nicely. And then with the backs of your fingers, you can press into the pan. I like to reinforce the sides, and that reinforcing means doubling down a little bit. I push this down a little bit like that, all the way around. Now you can get the excess off, press this down like that, and use your rolling pin to just break it off. And that works very well. It gives you a very nice crust. Chill this for about 20 minutes before you bake it. So we have our chilled shell, looks good. You don't have to dock it because it's a dense dough. The egg yolks keep it nice and flat. We're going to blind bake. And a piece of parchment paper looks like I'm getting ready to throw it away or throw it at somebody. But just wrinkle that up. It makes it more malleable and it'll fit nicer into the shell. Have your oven preheated to 375 and add your weights. These are all kinds of different beans and lentils, split peas, and they make a very nice weight. So this goes right into the oven for about 20 minutes. Remove the weights and the paper and bake until it's a nice golden brown. Here's our finished tart shell, nice crispy brown crust, and it's ready to fill. You have to pit the cherries. That's the time-consuming thing to do. So best to try to find a cherry pitter. The best one, I think, is this German version. And the pits fall into this container here. But don't you love that? This goes like fast, really great. Now this you can find in odd little hardware stores. You put the cherry right here, and you just push this down, and the pit goes into the jar, and the cherry is pitted. And then there's this one. I just want to show you all these versions because they're kind of interesting. This one, you put the cherry here, and you push down, and the pit comes out, and your cherry is done. So whatever way you choose to do it, 3½ cups of cherries. So cut these in half and add them to your 3½ cups. And now we're going to whisk the cream until it's nice and smooth. This is chilled. And add 1/2 cup of heavy cream whipped. This will lighten it slightly, enrich it slightly, and add a little bit of flavor. And I'm mixing that in. And now put this pastry cream right into your shell. Now you could chill this again if you'd like, but I'm going to put the cherries right on top. We're putting the cherries cut side up all the way around. And the stem end out or in, whichever way, but once you start, try to be uniform for the prettiest tart. So here, last cherry. And I have cherry jam that's been strained, and add a little Kirschwasser. And then dress your tart. And once you do this final little embellishment, put the tart in the refrigerator, let it chill before unmolding, cutting, and serving. Chewy chess tart. I like serving this by itself or with just a little bit of unsweetened whipped cream. And now for a cookie crust. This is made out of vanilla wafers, and you can grind these up in your food processor. Get them very fine. Okay, so there's your very finely ground vanilla wafers. Add 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 2½ tablespoons of sugar. And stir in your melted 6 tablespoons of butter. So that's your crust. So simple. I know your family will love this pie. Let me show you how to form this one. So fun to make because it is a no-roll crust. Spread it as evenly as you can in the bottom of a removable bottom 9-inch tart shell. This is like a quiche pan, tart shell pan. And with your fingertips, just pull up about 1/4 inch thick on the side. You can make this crust in advance. And now to flatten the bottom, you can just use the bottom of your measuring cup like this and really compress the crust. You're going to chill this before baking. What a neat and simple crust. It goes into a preheated 325-degree oven for 12 to 15 minutes. And now the filling for the tart, 3 whole eggs and 1 egg yolk. And add 1/2 teaspoon of the very best vanilla. There. To this, add your dry ingredients. 1 cup of granulated sugar. When I tasted this pie, I just fell in love with it. You can't eat a lot because it's very rich, but it is very tasty. Because really, there's not much in it except sugar and eggs and a 1/2 cup of packed light brown sugar. Pack that in. And now this gets incorporated, and there's one surprise ingredient which gives a crunchiness to the filling that I think is very appealing, and that's cornmeal. 1 tablespoon of fine cornmeal, and add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And one last ingredient, melted butter. 1 stick, 8 tablespoons, 1/4 pound. This is what gives the chewiness to the filling. Pour this in. Once filled, get this into a 325 oven, preheated, and bake this for about 35 minutes. This chess tart is done. Let this cool to room temperature and then chill it for an hour or so. And we have one that's already chilled right here, and I can put this on our serving pedestal. Oh, it's so pretty. Watch how easily the ring comes off. And you can just put this right on your decorative serving dish. And that is your chewy chess tart. It's like eating little bars of the best candy. Nothing says summer like a blueberry pie. To make it extra special, I often make mine with a lattice top, which not only allows you to take a peek at the colorful filling inside, but it also acts as a vent for steam escape. It may look complicated, this particular lattice, but I'll share my trick for making it as easy as pie. First, the pâte brisée. 3 3/4 cups of all-purpose unbleached flour and 1½ teaspoons of granulated sugar and 1½ teaspoons of salt. So the first thing I do is mix up my dry ingredients by pulsing. That's called pulsing, up and down, up and down. And then you can add your butter. 3 sticks of butter, and the butter has been neatly cut into 1/4-inch cubes. This makes it very easy to get the right texture of pastry by preparing your butter like this. And it's icy, icy cold. The golden rule of pâte brisée is make it cold. Everything, the flour, the butter, the ice water, and then pulse. And then you add 1/2 cup of ice water. And notice how I'm pulsing and adding the iced water sort of on the outside of the feed tube. There. I think we have our pastry. Take it off, and with this much, I'm going to divide it into 3 equal discs of dough. You can use your plastic to pull the pastry together. And if it's a warm day, work as quickly as you can. Do not let this pastry get warm. It will not be the kind of flaky pie crust that you want. So there. Just place them on a baking sheet and put them in the refrigerator for at least an hour. So now for the filling, which is 3 pints of blueberries, the zest of 1 lemon, and also the juice of a lemon. The combination of lemon and blueberry is just spectacular. Very good for you. 1/2 cup of sugar, only 1/2 cup. Can't complain that it's too sweet. 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. Cornstarch will be very helpful in thickening the juices that come out of the berries. And a traditional spice is cinnamon for blueberry, but just 1/4 teaspoon though. You can stir this up, and a little sprinkling of salt will also be nice for the filling. And 2 tablespoons of butter. Just cut the butter into little pieces and stir this all together. The butter helps enrich the juices that are being thickened by the cornstarch. It's a whole little method. And this is ready to put into the pie. So now I'm going to roll out 1 disc of the pastry to fit the bottom of the 9-inch glass pie plate. I think that is a very nice size for the pie plate. If you have difficulty lifting up your crust, the easiest I find is just to roll it on the pin like this and unroll it into your dish. And then don't use your sharp fingernails if you have them. I don't have them, but use the back of your fingers like this to press this into the dish. And then what I do is I put this right back into the fridge and chill it while I'm rolling out the rest of the topping. And now for the lattice top of the pie, just roll your dough into a square approximately 11 inches. And we're going to cut this into strips. Big pie day, you don't have to go to the gym. Get lots of upper body exercise. And you can transfer this piece onto a parchment-lined baking sheet. There. And get that into the fridge while you roll out the third. So here we have our chilled dough, and you cut this into 1-inch strips. There. And save your scraps. You might need them for something else. So you'll cut this piece and your second piece into the 1-inch strips. So now you're going to place this on top of 2. You're going to lift 2. So this is the beginning of your lattice. Then you're going to go under. It's basically basket weaving 101. And the colder your dough is, by the way, the easier it is to weave. So there, now get that right back into the refrigerator, chill it, then you'll put it on top of your pie. So now get your gorgeous blueberry filling into your bottom crust. Now brush the edge of the pastry with egg yolk. This is your glue. It's going to let the lattice adhere right to the top of the pie. Now this, we've trimmed the edges. Just lift this right on top of the entire blueberry pie and press all the way around the edges. And then with a pair of scissors, just trim about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of your pie plate. So now take your fingertips and tuck this under. Just make sure it's really sealed. And then brush with the same egg yolk to give a beautiful, beautiful golden brown color to the lattice. And I'm also going to sprinkle with sanding sugar to give an added crunch to this pie. Now your oven should be preheated to 425 degrees. Put the pie right in and bake for 20 minutes. And then reduce the heat to 375 and continue baking until the filling is bubbling and the crust is evenly browned. 60 to 75 minutes. So this is what the pie looks like when it comes out of the oven. Once you've mastered the technique of weaving pastry dough, feel free to think outside the box by varying the width of the strips. The edges can be ruffled or straight. The choice is yours. The pie is beautiful.